I know a great coronavirus joke, but you probably won't get it. Hello, seventh grade. Good morning. This video is going to finish up chapter 13 and our unit on Japan. So after we do this, we'll be moving on to medieval Europe, which is the most exciting thing to learn about in seventh grade social studies. So we are on slide 19 of 21, or no, sorry, slide 20 of 21. We're going to be talking about a shift in power away from the nobles to the local daimyo. Holly, I'm having class right now. Please. You are interrupting. Thank you. And then we're also going to learn about how the roles of women in Japanese society changed. All right, so we know that at the Heian court, remember this is the court at Kyoto, the Japanese nobles and the emperor were the most powerful, wealthy, educated people in all of Japan. And this is going to change pretty dramatically with the rise of feudalism. So you can watch previous videos to learn more about why feudalism arose in Japan. Essentially, it's because as the emperor lost his power through the interference of some of the very powerful families at the Heian court, this created a lot of chaos in other parts of Japan. A lot of nobles who were not at the court started to fight with each other. This led to an outbreak of violence. There was a lot of destabilization. And in order to protect themselves, the typical Japanese people, these are the peasants, went to their local lords, the daimyos, and offered their services, usually as laborers, to these daimyos. Sometimes they gave up their land to the daimyos in exchange for protection. All right, so that's why Japanese feudalism arose in a nutshell. So remember, feudalism is an economic and social system in which people surrender their property and certain freedoms and rights they have in exchange for protection and the right to work on the Lord's land. Right? Usually they would get some a share of the crops that they grow. They would have to swear loyalty to the Lord. Sometimes they'd have to serve in the Lord's military service. A lot of the crops, most of the crops they grew would go and belong to the Lord. All of this is going to be repeated in medieval Europe. That's why I'm repeating it now. But now I want to talk about why power shifted away from the nobles of the Heian court to lower ranking nobles, these landowners out in the countryside, the daimyos. So there's basically three reasons that this power shift occurred. All right. So number one, the daimyos were able to develop really strong armies underneath them because they were able to fill their armies with all of these young men who had wives and families that they were worried about protecting. And so they would go to the daimyo and they would say, I'll do whatever you want, just protect my family, make sure my family is fed during this difficult time. The daimyo would say, okay, we're going to protect you and your family, but in exchange, I want you to serve in my army for 2 years or whatever. All right. So that would be the deal that would be made. So the daimyos started to develop very large armies. And then the emperor, when he was engaged in military activities outside of Japan, or if he just wanted to shore up Japan's defenses, he would have to borrow these soldiers, these armies, from the daimyos. Well, the daimyos wouldn't give it to the emperor for free. Right? The daimyos would say, okay, emperor, you can use my army for the next year, but in exchange, I need more land. So the emperors would give land to the daimyos. So this made the daimyos even more powerful, right? The nobles at court, they don't have these small armies to offer the emperor. Remember, they're offering the emperor and his family training and education in things like the arts and literature and manners and different aspects of Japanese culture. But that's not valuable to an emperor who is worried about protecting Japan. What an emperor who wants to protect Japan is worried about is building up a strong army. So he would reward the daimyos more than even the nobles at court, who previously were considered the most powerful and most important out of all the nobles. All right, reason number two the power shift happened because the Japanese economy was growing very fast at this time. Now, it's very strange that the economy was developing when there was so much chaos in Japan. This is very rare. Usually, when there's a lot of chaos in the world, the economy collapses. In fact, this is what's happening in the United States with the coronavirus and all around the world, right? There's a lot of chaos and uncertainty. And because nobody really knows how serious this coronavirus is at this point, or, um, you know, there's no vaccine for it yet. There's not a lot of information about it yet. Nobody knows how long this is going to last. One thing that we're seeing is the economy in the United States and the world is starting to collapse, right? This is why all these businesses are closing. It's not just fear of the virus, but it's also fear of the economic impact that the virus is going to have, right? This is why so many people are losing their jobs. Right? Usually when there's chaos and uncertainty in the world, economies collapse. But in Japanese society, the chaos actually did not cause the economy to collapse. It allowed Japan to it allowed a lot of small businesses in Japan to have more freedom than they used to be able to have before. It allowed a lot of merchants to um, not have to go through the emperor or the laws of Japan when they were trading with China, for example, right? So the Japanese economy was growing, and whenever an economy grows, land becomes a lot more valuable. And who owns all the land at this point? The daimyos, right? The daimyos who are receiving all this land. So what the land produces becomes more valuable. The land itself is more valuable. Therefore, the owner of the land is more wealthy, right? So artisans and merchants are trading with China a lot at this point. So there's a lot of money flowing through Japan's veins. There's a lot of goods from mainland Asia that are entering Japan for the first time. Um, this also makes the places where these merchants and artisans live very powerful too. So towns and small cities outside of the capital become extremely wealthy, or at least wealthy compared to how they were before. And usually, where money is, there's a lot of power. Right? And this wealth makes Japan more independent from China. So people feel like they don't have to rely on the emperor as much for protection. The third reason that this shift happens is because of the spread of Buddhism. So we know that monasteries became places of learning, and monasteries encouraged people of all social classes to receive an education. So there were a lot more poor people who were learning to read and write, for example. So this meant that nobles at court were not the only ones who benefited from education anymore. Right? So those are the three reasons power shifts away from the emperor and his court and to the daimyos, who originally were lower ranking nobles, and to merchants and artisans. All right, let's talk quickly about the role of women in Japan and how that changed. So this is slide 21. All right, so in the beginning, under the Shinto cultural influence, women were in many ways treated equally to men, right? Women had the opportunity to be in positions of real political and social power, right? Some women were actually clan leaders, priestesses in charge of worshiping the Shinto gods. And a few women in Japan's history were actually even empresses. But when Buddhism and Confucianism arrive, women's status diminishes. And this is because in Confucianism, women are actually considered to be inferior to men. Sorry, ladies. And Confucian principles of harmony require that women be obedient to their fathers and husbands. And in Buddhism, while women aren't explicitly seen as inferior to men, a lot of Buddhist sects believed that women should not be allowed to participate in certain Buddhist religious practices. They were banned from certain monasteries. And a few even said it was impossible for women to enter nirvana because a woman could never, ever achieve enlightenment because women are inferior, I guess. So, yeah, there we go. Sexist. Yeah. Misogyny. Sorry for my toxic masculinity. All right. That's it for our study of Japan. And I look forward to seeing how you guys do on your Japan test. I'm going to post a study guide, and we'll have a Zoom and we can go over it. I'll tell you how your online test is going to work. Have a nice day.